My name is Lena Ward, and if you had asked me half a year ago, I would have sworn I lived a peaceful, stable, and fairly ordinary life. My husband, Evan, was the kind of man who took pride in order, reputation, and polished appearances, perfectly trimmed suits, perfectly plated meals, perfectly curated social circles. He was respected at his company as a senior financial analyst, and with every new achievement, his ego seemed to expand just a little more. I rarely questioned it. I worked from home doing what he frequently dismissed as my little research gig, the kind of phrase said with a smile that pretended to be harmless but carried the weight of quiet dismissal. I let it slide because correcting him felt pointless. We were together nearly 8 years, and for most of that time, I convinced myself we were content. That illusion cracked one evening while we got ready for his colleague's engagement party. I walked into the bedroom wearing a dress that made me feel confident and soft at the same time, nothing extravagant, just something I loved. When I asked him how I looked, he didn't answer right away. Instead, he kept adjusting his tie, eyes focused on his reflection as though he were the only person in the room. Then he sighed and delivered a sentence that didn't sound explosive at first, but detonated everything inside me. Sometimes I feel like I've outgrown us. My team thinks I could be with someone more ambitious. Someone who actually matches the life I'm building. I stared at him, unsure if I misheard. He continued as though he'd been rehearsing it for weeks. You're comfortable being average. You don't push yourself. You could stand out, Lena, but you don't. It's like you're afraid to be exceptional. What he didn't know, because he never cared enough to ask, was that for the past 3 years, I'd been leading a confidential artificial intelligence research group developing predictive risk and security models for high-level organizations. Our work was classified, our salaries and contracts invisible to the public. The last project I completed alone secured a $19.4 million federal grant. But none of that existed in Evan's world because confidentiality meant humility in the spotlight. He never once asked what I really did. He preferred the version of me that fit his narrative. So when he left that night without waiting for an answer, I remained sitting in our living room, suddenly aware that I had spent years shrinking so he could feel tall. There is always a moment where silence becomes heavier than the truth, and that night, I knew I would never choose silence again. The morning after Evan's words fractured something in me, I woke up feeling strangely steady. Not angry, not heartbroken, but awake in a way I hadn't felt in years. Evan was already dressed for work, scrolling his phone like nothing had happened. He barely looked up when he said, "We should take a break. Some space might help us figure out what we want." His tone was calm, like he was suggesting a weekend trip, not pulling apart nearly a decade of life together. I simply nodded. There was no point in arguing with a man who had already made me small in his mind. As he packed a bag, I watched quietly, studying him as though he were a stranger. Everything he wore, every accessory he owned, from the smartwatch to the leather messenger bag, had been a gift I bought during years when he was building his career and struggling financially. But he never connected those dots. He zipped his suitcase and finally looked at me, expecting panic or pleading. Instead, I said, "Before you go, there's something I should tell you." He paused, eyes finally meeting mine, but even then, I could see he wasn't listening, he was waiting to respond. So I didn't give him the satisfaction. I simply said, "Take all the time you need, Evan. I'll be here living my life." His relief was almost insulting. He kissed my forehead like I was a child who didn't understand the world and walked out the door. The silence afterward wasn't empty, it was cleansing. After he left, I opened my laptop and began organizing files. Grants, security clearances, development roadmaps, confidential project logs, government approvals, everything that represented years of intellectual labor he never bothered to ask about. I sent messages to my team, letting them know I was prepared to step into public-facing leadership now that our final clearance phase was approved. The truth was, I had been waiting for the green light to reveal what we'd been building, and now, suddenly, I was glad I had waited. That afternoon, I met with Dr. Maren Locke, my colleague and closest ally in the project. She took one look at me and asked, "So, it finally happened?" I didn't need to explain. She already knew the dynamic of my marriage better than I ever admitted. "Good," she said softly. "You're done shrinking. Now it's time." She pushed a printed document across the table, a schedule of media interviews, keynote opportunities, and patent release dates. I stared at it, realizing my quiet life was about to end, and something larger, bolder, and louder was finally beginning. 2 weeks passed with an eerie calm. Evan sent short messages, neutral, detached, almost administrative. "I'll stop by Thursday for mail. Can we discuss bills? Are you free to talk?" I answered only when necessary, never offering more than a sentence. While he wrestled with whatever story he'd built in his mind, I was building something entirely different. I spent those weeks preparing for a moment he never imagined could exist, the unveiling of the version of me he never bothered to see. During that time, our confidential research group transitioned quietly from classified obscurity into strategic public release mode. Our systems, predictive threat AI models, advanced encryption forecasting tools, real-time breach response frameworks, had already been tested and adopted in pilot programs. The world just didn't know who built them. That was about to change. My colleague Dr. Locke scheduled a private demonstration dinner for potential investors, government liaisons, and industry leaders. The location, the Meridian Room, a reservation-only rooftop venue overlooking the city skyline, elegant, intimate, untouchable. She insisted we make it personal, not just technical. "People don't invest in code," she said, tapping her pen against the table. "They invest in the people capable of rewriting systems." When she handed me the final guest list, I paused. At the bottom, in clean bold print, Evan Ward, observer status only. I looked at her, shocked. She nodded without apology. "You don't need to humiliate him," she said, "but he needs to witness the truth he was too blind to ask about." The night before the event, Evan texted me, "I think we should meet privately first. I owe you an explanation." I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, "Tomorrow is fine. You'll have plenty of clarity then." The day of the event, I dressed slowly, intentionally. A black tailored suit, not loud, not flashy, just powerful. For the first time in years, I felt fully present in my own body. Not muted. Not minimized. When I arrived at the Meridian Room, the city lights reflected against the glass walls like constellations. Investors were already seated. Cameras, discreet and silent, recorded data for internal transparency documentation. And then Evan walked in. He stopped the moment he saw the room, suits, badges, screens displaying prototype simulations, and then saw me standing at the center beside Dr. Locke. The confusion on his face deepened into realization, then discomfort. I simply smiled politely and said, "Welcome, Evan. Tonight, we discuss the future." He didn't speak, he couldn't. Because finally, I wasn't invisible. I was undeniable. The room settled as the lights dimmed and the display screens flickered awake with encrypted visual models. I stepped forward, steady and composed, and began speaking, not with hesitation or apology, but with authority that had been waiting years to breathe. I introduced our AI system, CentraLogic, explaining how it predicted cyber threats before they occurred, using adaptive intelligence capable of learning criminal patterns faster than existing global security infrastructures. The audience watched in focused silence, some leaning forward, others scribbling notes, all aware they were witnessing something groundbreaking. Evan sat in the second row, shoulders tightened, eyes fixed on me with an expression I couldn't quite decipher, disbelief, discomfort, maybe something closer to regret. When the demonstration simulation reached its peak, showing a real-time prevention of a simulated data breach that would have cost a corporation hundreds of millions, audible murmurs spread through the room. Dr. Locke stepped up beside me and revealed key metrics, 3 major agencies already in contract negotiations, 5 private sector beta partners ready to sign pending this presentation, and a projected first-year valuation that made the air feel electric. She paused before saying, all of this exists because of one person's leadership, someone who worked quietly, strategically, and without recognition. Someone who chose excellence over validation. Then she turned to me and continued, none of this would exist without Lena. Applause erupted, genuine, powerful, overwhelming. My chest tightened, but not with fear, with release. Evan's expression shifted, his confidence cracked just enough for truth to seep in. I held his gaze briefly, not with triumph but clarity. After the demonstration, investors eagerly approached, asking questions, offering meetings, requesting contracts. One executive from a global security firm leaned in and said, "We've been waiting for technology like this. You're about to redefine our entire sector." And somewhere in the middle of that momentum, Evan finally approached me. His voice was quiet, not sharp, not defensive, just stripped of the certainty he once wore like armor. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked. I replied calmly, "Because you never asked. And somewhere along the way, I stopped believing you wanted to know." His jaw tightened as the truth hung between us. "I was wrong," he whispered. Without bitterness, I nodded. "Yes. But sometimes realizing too late is part of consequence." Before he could respond, the event coordinator called me forward to sign preliminary partnership confirmations. As I stepped away, Evan remained standing there, watching, not entitled, not superior, but silent and unsure. For the first time in our marriage, he finally saw me. Not the supportive background figure he assumed I was, but the architect of something far greater than he had ever imagined. And in that moment, I realized something deeper. Being underestimated had never been my weakness. It had been my quiet advantage. In the days that followed the presentation, the world I once lived in quietly transformed into something entirely new. Contracts moved forward quickly, interviews were requested, private meetings were scheduled, and CentralLogic officially shifted from classified innovation to one of the most sought-after technologies in the cybersecurity world. My name, once a polite footnote to Evan's career, was suddenly on proposal documents, industry articles, and invitations from global agencies. Yet through all of it, the strangest feeling wasn't excitement or pride, it was relief. Relief that I no longer had to shrink to fit a space that was never meant for the fullest version of me. Evan tried reaching out several times, calls, messages, attempts at conversation, but I answered only when professionalism required it. On the 4th evening after the event, he finally asked to meet in person, and I agreed, not out of hope for repair, but for closure. We met at a quiet cafe near the waterfront. He arrived early, visibly rehearsing his thoughts. When I sat down, he took a breath and said, "I misjudged you. I judged everything based on what I saw, not what was real. I'm sorry." His apology wasn't dramatic or embellished, it was sincere, and maybe that was the most surprising part. But apologies don't mend fractures, sometimes they simply acknowledge them. "Evan," I replied softly, "you didn't just misjudge me, you didn't see me. And I can't stay in a life where I have to argue for my existence." His shoulders dropped the way buildings collapse when structural truth finally outweighs denial. He nodded slowly. "I understand. I just wish I understood sooner." I offered a small, bittersweet smile. "So do I. But late recognition is not the same as partnership." We ended the conversation without anger, only acceptance. 2 weeks later, the papers were finalized. Our marriage became a completed chapter, not a failed one, just one that reached its natural ending. Months later, I stood backstage at an international technology summit, moments away from delivering the keynote address. Cameras flashed, the audience buzzed with anticipation, and my name glowed across the massive screen behind me. The woman who once hesitated to speak now carried the voice of a changing industry. As the host called me forward, I took a slow, steady breath, not to calm nerves, but to acknowledge the journey that brought me here. I walked onto the stage beneath bright lights and applause, not as someone's wife, not as someone underestimated, but as someone entirely self-defined. And in that moment, I knew the truth. I hadn't just reclaimed my worth, I had rewritten my future. And this time, I was not invisible. I was unmistakably seen. My name is Lena Ward, and if you had asked me half a year ago, I would have sworn I lived a peaceful, stable